This is Food Chemistry Unit 1. Here we'll look at current trends in food preservation, which include irradiation, packaging, and biotechnology. Food irradiation is a cold food preservation method in which the food is exposed to high-energy electromagnetic waves. The food moves from one end of a radiation field to another on a conveyor belt. Now, this was often used for hospital equipment, wine bottle corks, and cosmetics. It was moved to the food industry because large amounts of food were being destroyed by insects, molds, and sprouting. Potatoes sprout, but this often softens the tissue and produces toxins. So food irradiation can be used to reduce food losses. It's been approved in over 40 countries for over 60 products. Now, this started with the FDA in 1963. The first foods were wheat and wheat flour to reduce losses due to insects and molds. So in white potatoes, it reduced the sprouting. In spices and herbs, it reduced the contaminants. In pork, it destroyed trichinella, which is a roundworm. The effects of irradiation on food products. There can be chemical changes. So the energy to irradiate foods is called ionizing radiation. It produces ions in any substance it comes in contact with. This is unstable, it reacts quickly, and it will cause chemical changes that kill microbes and block enzymatic reactions. Now, irradiation is considered a food additive because radiolytic products, which are produced specifically from irradiation like CO2, carbon dioxide, are added to irradiated foods, and anything that's added to a food is considered a food additive. 30 years of testing this process have found no unique chemicals produced. All are similar to what occurs in other food processes. High protein foods like eggs, though, do not survive irradiation well. Actually, hydrogen peroxide is produced from the water molecules, and the result is a thin, watery egg. So some products just cannot handle this process. Energy used to irradiate foods comes in 3 different forms. We'll start with gamma. This is usually given off by a radioactive element, which are formed from when unstable nuclei break down. So we have cobalt-60, which is used for radiation therapy with cancer patients. 1 container of cobalt-60 radiates foods for 21 years. We also have cesium-137. This is a byproduct of the production of plutonium in nuclear reactors. It's more costly than cobalt-60. Gamma ray sources need to be kept in underground storage units. So this first image here shows you the gamma rays, how they're formed. All right, then we have electron beams. These are high energy electrons known as beta particles. There's no radioactive material to transport or dump. The beta particles are formed from electronic machinery. This is more costly than the gamma rays because of the running of the machine. So here's an example right here. So behind the set of windows here would be where the irradiation would be occurring using the electron beams. Ultraviolet light does not penetrate material. This is used for surface treatment. It kills microbes on the surface of food, along with equipment surfaces, the air and water in some food plants. So you might know this as what we use for our goggle cabinet cleaning here at school. So this is what a goggle cabinet looks like. When the goggles are in, you close and lock the door, and you turn this dial, and they are hit with ultraviolet radiation to kill any microbes on the goggles. Units of energy. RAD or rad is a radiation absorbed dose. So this is the amount of energy absorbed per gram of material. So the more complex an organism is, the lower the dose that's applied to that organism is needed for survival. So for humans, the max that we could take would be 400 rads. So you're not exposed to that at all, like on a daily basis, but if you were exposed to that much, you would not survive. But insects, quite different from us, they can take about 1,000 rads before their survival is affected. Okay, so this is just the dose for radiation. So there is public concern about irradiation. So there's the worry that eating irradiated foods creates the risk of genetic damage. So people think that food treated with radiation levels set by the FDA and then is fed to animals, they thought that maybe something would happen to the animal, but it's not. The animals did not have any genetic defects. So people think irradiating foods means making it radioactive, and that's not the case. So I know you've heard a lot of big words, a lot of scary words, but the point of this is you are just using this energy in the food to destroy contaminants and make the foods safer. So, irradiation kills Salmonella and E. coli in foods, but yet it doesn't kill C. botulinum. So yes, this radiation is strong, but not everything succumbs to it. Pesticide residues and additives may form radiolytic products. So people are worried about radiolytic products being formed, but these do not occur at dangerous levels. People worry about material being handled safely. So the shipping of that cobalt-60, for example, if it's not handled properly, there could be accidents or spills, although none have been reported in over 30 years. There could be a meltdown or an explosion, but the amounts are too small and not the right type for a meltdown. So there's no meltdown of any reactor that's going to happen in this case. You're not using a reactor, you're just using the energy. Foods can be irradiated after packaging, so people worry that the packages will form an unpleasant flavor or add a toxin to the food. And consumers do need to be educated, so that's understandable, but key organizations like the American Medical Association, for example, also need to support it. All right, controlling irradiation. So food must be tested before it is sold. The FDA must approve plants for irradiation, and they must be inspected often. Wheat, wheat flour, spices, herbs, teas, and white potatoes have no labeling. So these were the first foods that were approved for irradiation by the FDA. Fresh meats, poultry, fruits, vegetables, these are whole irradiated foods. These require the green and white symbol or Radura, which is right up here, on the label. And it also needs to say treated with irradiation. Processed foods with irradiated foods as ingredients, such as soups, frozen entrees, and pizza, there's no need for the Radura or any other label. If you eat processed foods, you have probably eaten irradiated foods. So right now it would be meats, poultry, fruits, and vegetables, these whole foods that would require that symbol. And I'm going to post two videos, one about just understanding this nuclear science, and then an actual facility at Iowa State University that has been using this process. All right, so that was irradiation. So let's now move to packaging. Packaging is so essential to the food industry that there's actually a degree in it called packaging engineering. So things to consider, the package needs to be economical to produce, it must protect the food product, and it must not dissolve into the food. The materials are regulated by the FDA. Packaging comes in contact with your food, and this might break down and become part of the food. So this is all things that a packaging engineer needs to consider when designing and using packaging. Now we also have what's known as a primary container. The food is in direct contact with the package, like a carton of milk. A secondary container holds the primary container. So if you have a box of cereal, the cereal is in a bag, that's the primary container, in a box, which is the secondary container. Functions of packaging. The main function is to be a barrier between food and contaminants, such as moisture, gas, odors, and light. Packaging protects food from impact during shipping. It identifies your contents. Some packaging is used for storage, cooking, and serving, like a microwave dinner. You just put it into the microwave and you can eat right out of there. Hermetic. This is a container that's completely sealed or airtight, so water, vapor, gases, and odors cannot enter or leave. So this is good for cans, bottles, or what's known as aseptic packaging, which is like a sterilized package. Some packages need to be ventilated, like refrigerated doughs. They'll release that carbon dioxide. That package would explode if not ventilated to release some of it. Types of packaging materials. The material selected depends on the function. So is protection needed? What kind of shipping will it need? What kind of storage? The flexibility of the container. Is the material lightweight? Is the material disposable? Is it edible, like sausage casings, for example? The process of preservation needs to be considered. The chemical contents of the material need to be considered, along with any coatings inside of cans, for example. Materials must pass sanitation and toxicity tests, use and abuse tests. All right, and here are some types. Metals. Some common metals include steel, tin, and aluminum for packaging food. Steel is inexpensive, it's easily shaped, and can form that hermetic closure. The cans are usually coated with an enamel or resin because steel is corrosive. Tin. A thin layer of tin coating is around steel cans. It's stable longer and it's less corrosive, but only about 0.25% of a tin can is actually tin. So you can see it's actually a coating around steel, or if you have a tin can, there's probably a mixture of aluminum along with that tin. Now, aluminum. This is lightweight, stable against corrosion, and easily shaped. But there is a lack of structural strength, just think of aluminum foil, which limits the use in the canning industry. It's costly, but it's recyclable. So here you have steel, your tin can, which is most often combined with aluminum, and then your aluminum packaging. Glass. Glass is chemically inert, so it does not react with your food. It won't contaminate the food. It's used for home canning. It's one of the oldest means of packaging. It's easily breakable though, especially with temperature changes. Scratches can lead to breaks, so it's often coated with wax or silicone. It's also heavier, so that increases the shipping costs and it increases the consumer price for the product. Paper. It's very lightweight, low in cost, and recyclable. If combined with plastic or aluminum, it can form that hermetic seal. Paper that touches food must be free of chemicals and contaminants. Paper is usually coated with wax, plastics, or aluminum. It depends on the food and the use. A coating can be added for strength, sealability, grease resistance, or flexibility. And here's some examples. Plastics. They are lightweight, economical, and versatile, which means to have many uses. Packaging films. These are thin, flexible, transparent materials. They're often made of cellophane, which is a specially processed cellulose, which is a plant component, right? So there's over 100 types. There's various levels of permeability, which means what liquids and gases can pass through that film. Edible films and coatings. Edible rice paper is often used for things like spring rolls. You can see my first picture here. These need to be safe to eat and complement the flavor of the food. They can be manufactured from amyloid starch or casein protein or animal intestines for sausages. Coatings, liquids like wax, which you might see on cucumbers, for example, to protect them from mold, or oil. Raisins and Raisin Bran cereal, this is kind of cool. They're sprayed with starch to hold in the moisture. So if you eat Raisin Bran and you wonder why the raisins have that little white powder on there, that's actually starch to maintain their moisture. And then in that middle picture, you can see those decorations, those butterflies. Those would also be edible as well. Laminates. These are several layers that are fused together, and a good example is a retort pouch, which is used for U.S. military rations. So these will have several layers in there because they need to withstand wherever the military is serving. So there's different types of conditions, so that food needs to hold up in that kind of container. Reduced oxygen packaging. This is an atmosphere with little or no oxygen. Research shows this extends shelf life. So red meat, poultry, seafood, pasta, and cheeses, along with pre-cooked meals, snacks, and dried foods are good for this process. CAP. This is controlled atmosphere packaging. It may absorb oxygen. It's released from a food product or reacts with the product. So there's research being done on a grapefruit lining. That lining breaks down the enzyme responsible for the bitter taste. So you're left with a sweet taste without the extra sugar. So you're controlling that atmosphere when you're packaging your food. And I'm going to post these two videos. One is going to show you a man talking about his apples. It's a particular type of apple that uses the controlled atmosphere. And then I'll also show you this video, which you'll actually see where those apples are stored using a controlled atmosphere. MAP is a modified atmosphere packaging. This is a one-time flushing of a container with gas, like potato chip bags that are filled with carbon dioxide or nitrogen. So you may think you're not getting a lot in there, but the reason for so much space is to prevent the chips from being crushed during shipping. Desiccants. These remove substances that are harmful to food from the package environment. These absorb oxygen without releasing materials in desiccant packets, or they absorb water to prevent microbe growth. And these might look familiar to you, right? You've seen these before. All right, so our last example now will be biotechnology. So this is our last current trend. This is the use of living organisms to create new or improved products. So plants, animals, or microbes can be used. All right, so we have genetic engineering, right? So this is where you grow plants with the best traits. But this has been around for centuries. We only have newer methods that have been developed. Plants have been crossbred for larger size and being disease resistant. Animals are crossbred for more meat or muscle. Modern methods just happen to isolate the desired traits better and save time. So with modern genetic engineering, you can identify a gene for a desired trait, extract it, combine it with a host, what you're trying to improve, and then you can use this to generate a different species, a more beneficial species. So if you take flounder, for example, that's a type of fish, they have a gene for withstanding cold water temperatures. So if you take that gene, combine it with a tomato, you get a frost-resistant tomato. So there's a tomato known as a flavor saver that use this process. And why do this? So this could increase the food supply. You can get higher quality foods. You can get disease and insect-resistant plants, which increases crop yields and lowers costs. You can also add nutrients to food. Corn, potatoes, soybean, cotton, canola, peppers have already been altered by biotechnology. It can be used to improve the food supply, reduce allergies, reduce toxins. There is a debate, though, about genetically engineered foods in terms of the safety, labeling, and how much of the other parts of the food is really being altered. So if you want to watch this video, I will post it for you about genetically modified organisms.